Hello, and welcome to our webinar, The ABCs of AHUs, Housing for a Changing Des Moines. I'm Brad Anderson, and on behalf of AARP Iowa, I'm very pleased to be a part of this important topic. Now, some of you may be wondering about the title of this webinar. You know your ABCs, but do you know your AHUs? Well, I'm here to help. AHU stands for Accessory Household Unit. Now, you may have heard the term ADU, which stands for Accessory Dwelling Unit. AHUs and ADUs are the same thing, and we're going to be using those two terms interchangeably throughout this webinar. Now, there are a lot of different names for AHUs. Some people call them guest houses, cottage flats, cottage houses, in-law suites, Fonzie flats, because Fonzie lived above the garage in an AHU in the Cunningham's house during Happy Days. Regardless of what they're called, we're going to learn lots of things about AHUs, including we're going to learn about the different types of AHUs, how they may benefit you, where you can legally build an AHU, and we're going to offer some great resources to help you get started planning an AHU if that's something that you want to do down the road. Additionally, we have two great local experts joining us today. First is Mike Ludwig with the City of Des Moines. He is the Deputy Director of Development Services. Mike will help us understand some of the specific zoning laws related to AHUs here in Des Moines. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, Brad. Thanks for having me here today.
You bet. Next is Kris Saddoris. Kris has 35 years of experience in real estate development, and Kris is the president of a board of directors of a local nonprofit here in Des Moines that is Home Inc., which is dedicated to creating opportunities for quality, affordable housing. Welcome, Kris.
Great. Thanks, Brad. I appreciate being here.
Great. Now, Kris, Home Inc. has taken on a really cool AHU project here in Des Moines. Would you care to share some of the details about that project with us today?
Thanks, Brad. I'd love to. Home Inc. is partnered with the city and several other organizations, including AARP. We were a challenge grant recipient to build both a single-family home that we typically do, but we wanted to add an ADU or an AHU as the city defines it. And so we're building a normal 4-bedroom, 2-story house that we do. And we worked with Invest DSM, who's a local revitalization effort between the city and the county to acquire a lot in the Highland Park neighborhood, one of our kind of inner city neighborhoods. And we wanted to be one of the first in the neighborhood to bring this project, and it's currently under construction. So the AHU in this case will be a separate 500 square foot unit that's actually detached from the larger home, but attached to the garage. And by City of Des Moines definitions, all AHUs must have living quarters, a kitchen, a bathroom, separate from the primary dwelling. Of course, this one will. But the design itself allows for lots of possibilities. So, it'll flex across different stages of life. So as folks want to remain in their neighborhood, it really allows them the opportunity to do that and kind of stay in the same home, but kind of move through the natural changes of life. We know that 2/3 of households today are 1 to 2 people, and a lot of homes are built for 4 or 5. So this kind of starts to address that. It allows us to add density in neighborhoods and kind of softly. It means we kind of come in and you don't really notice that it's there. But it's also a very sustainable way to develop. We're using existing infrastructure. In this case, we're going to a beautiful walkable neighborhood that has both a new retail center as well as a park within walking distance of the site.
Thanks, Kris. That's a great way to help people understand what these smaller homes are all about. Kris will be back in a bit to discuss how to get started if you want to build an AHU on your property. But now let's further define an AHU. So simply put, an AHU is a secondary residential unit that is built in the same lot as a larger existing home. And as Kris mentioned, it provides completely separate living quarters, a separate bathroom, a separate kitchen, and that is whether or not it is attached or detached to the primary house. Now, in 2019, Des Moines rewrote its zoning code for the first time in 54 years, paving the way for more AHUs to be built, which is great news, and we're really pleased that the city did that. So now you can watch this video to see examples of AHUs and some of the possibilities that they provide.
Have you heard the news about ADUs? Des Moines has updated zoning codes to make it easier for homeowners to build accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. They're often called in-law suites or guest houses. Whether added to an existing home Or built as a separate dwelling in the backyard, new ADUs are permissible as long as they meet the codes. There are rules about the size, design, and location of ADUs on a property. Some of the standards help ensure that ADUs are compatible with the existing home and character of the neighborhood. ADUs could offer the potential for rental income. However, the homeowner must live on site in either the primary house or the ADU. And like any other home addition, all ADUs require plans and permits. So it's important to contact the city's Planning and Zoning Commission to make sure your ADU plans comply with building codes. With these zoning updates, a homeowner in Des Moines could take advantage of the family-friendly options that ADUs provide. Think about the possibilities. A guest house could help a homeowner who needs extra income in retirement. An in-law suite could make a separate living space for a family caregiver. A fully accessible guest cottage could make a comfortable home for a grandparent. Residents of Des Moines can now explore all of these possibilities and more. How would you use an ADU?
ADUs, or AHUs, as they're known here in Des Moines, are a family-friendly option that can provide flexible housing solutions for a family's changing needs over time. Average household sizes are getting smaller, but houses are built today for larger families. So an AHU may be the right size for a shrinking household. Now, a recent AARP survey shows us that adults strongly prefer to live in their own neighborhood as they age. 77% of the respondents said they want to remain in their community for as long as possible, while 76% said they want to remain in their current residence as long as possible. AHUs are a way to help homeowners stay in their neighborhoods, which is where they want to be as they get older. In another recent survey, 78% said if they needed long-term care, they would prefer to receive it at home with caregiver assistance as opposed to going to a nursing home or assisted living or a group home or something like that. An AHU can provide independent living space for a caretaker or family member to live in while caring for an older adult. Kris, let's talk about some of the other uses that you've seen for AHUs.
Thanks, Brad. And as we talked about earlier, it's a great option to kind of flex across all stages in life because, as you alluded to, people do want to stay in their neighborhoods today. And how do we allow you to do that and, continue to connect with your neighborhood? So it can start off as a great way for a young couple to say they enter the neighborhood, maybe they rent the ADU, maybe they buy the house and they rent the ADU. And then as they have children, the children get older, maybe you need a nanny and she stays in the ADU. Well, as they're college age, maybe the kids go in the ADU, or maybe actually the family starts to use it as a remote office location. Well, then again, as you continue to age in the home, perhaps there's a caregiver that comes in there, perhaps there's family members that come in there. And then again, either the family can stay there, you can rent the ADU to help support just staying in the neighborhood, or actually the homeowner, as they choose and maybe need something that's more accessible, can choose to go into the ADU and either rent the home or again, have family in the home. So it's a great way to stay in your neighborhood, address those kind of natural kind of home life changes that go on, but yet stay in the same location. So it's also a great opportunity to do multi-generational living. It's something that we simply don't do yet well in Des Moines. And so it's a great way for us to invite lots of different opportunities into the neighborhood. And this has really been elevated in a kind of a COVID kind of world. And we understand the necessity of having family very close.
Yeah, there are just so many great options. Good points, Kris. And like I said earlier, every survey that we've taken shows that most people want to stay in their neighborhood as they age, and an AHU provides for that opportunity. Now, recently, I had an opportunity to talk with a family that has 3 generations living on the same property. So let's take a look at how they're using their attached in-law suite to benefit the whole family.
I'm Eliza.
And I'm Dan. We bought our house in 2021.
I'm Mac.
I'm Mary, and we're Dan's parents.
We live above their garage in an apartment.
I'm Johanna.
And I'm Kris. I'm Dan's older brother.
And we live across the street from Dan and Eliza and Kris's parents.
What brought you to the neighborhood? How did you end up within shouting distance of your entire family?
It was just a lucky coincidence that the house across the street from my brother and his wife that had space for my parents, just happened to open up.
We weren't even thinking about moving. Once we saw the space and knew that Kris and Joe were across the street, you know, it all became at least thinkable and then doable.
And I do think it makes it much easier that y'all are so independent. I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
There's,
Yes, you don't have to take care of us.
Right,
So,
like there's,
yeah, right,
it was very
right.
easy to decide to do that now, and you know, and how things go, but
Down the road you may regret it.
Well, and here we are, you know, but then we'll know each other's routines already. Like,
Right,
I mean, I think there's
right.
a lot of future proofing that this kind of does for us in a really positive way.
What's the best part about living so close to your grandkids?
It's just getting to know them, getting to understand, you know, how they live day to day. They're all just wonderful. They really are.
Welcome.
The ability to sort of walk across the street when mom and dad need something, or you know, we need 5 minutes to them watch the kids or something is nice.
Having cousins so close for the girls, we thought that was a really good opportunity.
If someone were to come to you and say, I'm considering an ADU, what would be your advice for them?
Understanding your expectations would be the greatest thing.
Accessibility, both short-term and long-term accessibility issues. Because right now, to get from the garage to upstairs, there's 2 flights of stairs. And so we're gonna put one of those chair lifts in. To have this opportunity for multi-generational living is quite frankly a blessing that a lot of people don't get to realize.
So that's a good example of one way an AHU is benefiting different generations. Mike, can you talk more broadly about how AHUs fit into the city's long-term plan? And then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what homeowners need to know if they want to build an AHU on their property.
In 2016, the city of Des Moines developed a new comprehensive plan that's known as Plan DSM. And it's a vision for how the city is going to evolve and grow to 2040 and beyond. It includes elements that affect all of our lives, things like transportation, economic development, parks and recreation, public infrastructure, utilities, and most importantly, housing. Part of the Plan DSM vision is to be a community that offers a broad diversity of choices in housing and at an affordability or ranges in prices that meet needs of residents throughout their life, and then provide those options in a vibrant, healthy, walkable community. AHUs, we believe, provide a great possibility for residents and their families because of that versatility.
But there was a zoning hurdle, is that right, Mike?
Correct, Brad. Part of the implementation of Plan DSM was updating our city's zoning ordinance. The last comprehensive rewrite was done in 1965. And so we embarked on a complete rewrite of our zoning ordinance and planning and design ordinance that were both adopted in 2019. And with the new changes, more homeowners are able to build accessory housing units in Des Moines.
Boy, 54 years is a long time between zoning. And I just want to, again, thank the city for everything they're doing to make AHUs more accessible for the residents here in Des Moines. So, Mike, let's get into some of the details. Are AHUs allowed everywhere in Des Moines?
Well, Brad, unfortunately, at this time, no. Right now, AHUs are permitted if you live in a district that allows 2 households on a lot through 4 households on a lot. That covers about 5 or 10% of the residential lots in Des Moines currently. The remaining 90% of residential lots would currently require a rezoning in order to allow an AHU to be built. The City Council will soon consider some revisions to the code that would make it much easier to build an AHU on those remaining 90% of residential lots. And if you're unclear about what your zoning is on your property, an individual can go to, certainly give our city staff a call at 515-283-4192, and we can certainly help people out with that. The owner in our current ordinance has to live in either the primary dwelling or the accessory housing unit, and no more than 1 AHU is allowed on a lot. For attached or internal AHUs, there can only be 1 entrance on the front facade of the building facing the street. And when it comes to planning and design, we do have standards in our planning and design code for these units. For example, a detached AHU has to be located in a rear yard. There's size limitations on AHUs, depending on the size of the primary dwelling on the property. So the AHU can be no larger than 50% of the square footage of the primary dwelling. And the lot coverage for an accessory dwelling unit in a rear yard cannot exceed 576 square feet or 25% of the lot area in the rear yard. The design has to match the character of the primary dwelling on the property, and that includes building materials, roof form, things like that. One really exciting thing that I'm happy to announce is that effective January 1 of 2022, the city is now offering a 10-year, 100% tax abatement on the added value to a property when a accessory housing unit is added, a new accessory housing unit is added.
That was big news, and we were excited to see that. So thanks for reminding us that happened. One thing we hear about is parking. What's the deal with parking related to AHUs? Do you need additional parking?
Yeah, since there's only one accessory housing unit allowed per lot, one off-street parking space is required per accessory housing unit.
Got it. Okay. Now, is there an easy way for me to determine, since I live in Des Moines, on if my property is zoned for an AHU or not?
Sure, Brett. You can find the zoning of your property and a lot of information pretty easily on the city's website. If an individual wants to type showmemyhouse.dsm.city in their search bar, that will take you to a web page on our city's website that provides all of that information, things such as zoning, what days your garbage and recycling are picked up, contact information for your council, ward member, and as well as inspectors for that area. So that's a really great source for finding out base information about the zoning district that you're in. And then I would suggest contacting city staff to confirm whether or not an AHU is allowed by right or whether there's an additional process required. In addition, I would encourage individuals to go to plandsm.dsm.city. Again, type that into their internet search bar, and that would take you to more information on Plan DSM, which is our comprehensive plan, and as well as our zoning code and our planning and design code regulations. There are PDFs of those documents available.
Great. Those are incredibly helpful resources. Thanks, Mike. Now, we have a short animation that shows you some of the ways homeowners can design an AHU. So let's take a look.
Accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, can play an important role in serving Des Moines' housing needs. These small auxiliary units were once commonplace across the U.S. And today, they're becoming more popular in communities like Des Moines. ADUs can take many forms. An ADU can be attached to an existing home or be a standalone home. Let's explore some ways homeowners can build ADUs and how they can help older adults remain in their communities. An existing garage offers several possibilities. For example, one owner could convert their garage into a fully accessible apartment for themselves as their mobility changes, and rent out their original house to a family to generate income. Or another owner could keep the garage and build an in-law suite over it as a low-cost option for a caregiver or a family member. A basement could also become an apartment. So could an attic. The homeowner might also build a small standalone structure on their lot for guests, or to rent out for additional income, or for a family caregiver if they ever need one. And later, could become their primary home when they want to downsize or live in a more accessible unit. Regardless of how and why they're built, ADUs can help ensure that people of all ages, including older adults, have more possibilities in where and how to live in their own communities.
Kris, how do I get started if I want to build an AHU on my property? What are those steps?
Well, first, it's really important to start to think about how you're going to use it. Just like Mike said, the city's been planning for 2040 and beyond. Each of us should be planning as well. So while you may want to use it as a guest house or relatives today, in the future, you may want to actually move into it and have it as your primary home with other family members. And so you want to think about, does it need to be accessible? Does it need to be on a single level? Is it okay for it to be above the garage with steps? Think about that long term, because it may not just be today. And for the investment that's going to be required today, you want to make sure that it will flex across your lifestyle for many years. Secondly, understand the neighborhood and the lot. Mike talked a lot about regulations, and those are going to be critical. But one of the things we've tried to be very careful with, the one that we have under construction now, is to understand our neighborhood. What does the neighborhood look like? What does it look like? What does my particular lot look like? How should this set? It has to set in the rear yard, as Mike alluded to, but what really makes sense? And so those are the types of things you want to understand. And then, of course, what can you afford? Really take the time to understand the fees that are involved: drawings, design fees, building permit, approval, inspection fees, and of course, the costs of construction and landscaping. So get a good partner, get a good consultation, whether it's an architect, a builder, a design firm that can help you through the process. Professionals are going to really ensure that this is a really good experience for you. So plan as you go through this. Most all of these are built by owners, as you really alluded to. It's rare for a developer to come in and do it. So it's important that people really take the time to understand what's needed.
All right, well, that's helpful. And like any good Iowan, let's get down to brass tacks. How much is it going to cost for me to build an AHU if that's something that I want to pursue?
Well, of course, like anything, the cost can vary dramatically based on a lot of kind of factors. Land preparation, obviously what the design is. Are you doing a small one, or is it 2-story? Is it larger? They can start around $50,000 in to go up. So there's lots of options. That's why I said really kind of plan, understand, but also understanding what you're willing to put towards it. What's it worth to you? How much, are you willing to spend on it? There's also lots of possibilities to finance. A lot of people use a combination of savings, a second mortgage, perhaps a home equity loan, a home renovation loan, and sometimes family members can be a part of that. Here locally, a group called Neighborhood Finance Corporation, who works in our city, has really been a great option, and they're one of the partners that are helping us do the demonstration project that's over in Highland Park. But really understand that and what that means. But again, realize that for the most part, this is owner-driven, and so it'll be very important to understand not only the costs up front, but also kind of how you're going to finance and make sure that it gets built.
And when it comes to the building, what is a reasonable timeline for building an AHU from start to finish?
Well, the reality is right now, it's about a year. By the time you get through the planning process, work through city staff, which has been very supportive of this process, and really get it on board, it's going to be about a year from start to finish. But also keep in mind that the building time that we have in central Iowa, it's those types of things will impact that. We don't get 12 months always, so it'll be important to kind of keep that in mind as well.
And Mike, of course, the permitting process is a big part of the timeline. Can you walk us through what's involved there?
Sure. Right now, our by right review for a new single-family residential structure is running about 7 to 10 days at the city. That's just the review time frame. If a rezoning is required, you need to add about 60 to 90 days to that time frame for just review and approval process.
Okay, great. And one of the things that we're seeing at AARP is for people trying to save for retirement or older adults who need income in retirement, that renting an AHU can be extremely helpful. So Mike, I wanted to know, if I wanted to rent an AHU or move into an AHU and rent out my main house, what are the things that I need to know before starting that process?
Sure. Well, first, as I stated before, you as the owner need to occupy one of the dwelling units. Short-term rentals, which we define as 30 days or less, So things like Airbnb or VRBO rentals do not require a rental certificate from the city of Des Moines. So state law preempts us from having regulations on that. Long-term rentals, which would be 30 days or more, require a rental certificate unless the unit is rented to either the owner's parents or grandparents or the owner's children or grandchildren. I would just suggest that for more detailed information that people contact our city's neighborhood services department for information regarding rental certificates and inspections. And that number for the neighborhood services department is 515-283-4046. And again, they can get more information on rental inspection and rental certificates if necessary.
Thanks, Mike. And I just want to put a plug in for the city, because when you make those calls, you're usually talking to a live person very quickly. So feel free to reach out to the city. They're incredibly helpful, and that's what they're there for. Kris, for people who have never been a landlord like myself, what are some of the practical implications on becoming a landlord?
Sure. One of the big things I'm going to recommend is everybody needs a lease, even if it's family members, as Mike alluded to, or a third party. It's just good practice that everybody needs a lease. So definitely make sure that you do that. It'll be important that you understand, if you're doing third parties, that we're screening tenants and we're understanding that we have to comply with anti-discrimination laws. And so having a prepared rental agreement will be important. And if you're looking at it as a rental, tracking the income and expenses will be important. We want to make sure that we maintain it in a habitable condition, because obviously, as again, Mike talked to you about, there will be times that there'll be a rental certificate that's required. We need to make sure that we respect tenants' privacy, because even if they're in the backyard, they still need to be in a safe place. And generally adhering to just both local, state, and federal laws. And so fortunately, Home Inc., the nonprofit that I'm a part of that's building the demonstration project, we actually provide that to people locally. We provide work to both tenants as well as landlords. We do that free of charge, and we're happy to do that. You can reach out to us through the Home Inc. website, and we're happy to provide any assistance that folks need with that.
I just have to say, Home Inc. has been such an awesome resource that we've got here right in our very own backyard, and it's been around for more than 50 years. So be sure and take advantage of that as a resource. Now, I hope you've enjoyed our discussion and it's helped you think about whether or not adding an AHU is a good fit for you. And as you think about some of these possibilities, here is some advice from AARP's very own Danielle Aragoni and Shannon Guzman.
Don't be afraid to envision your home functioning in a different way. We know that, 3/4 of people over the age of 50 want to be able to age in their home and their communities, and yet they don't have the right kind of options available to them to do just that. So think differently about your space, about what your neighborhood might look like if ADUs were a part of that. And, imagine how that might benefit you and your neighbors.
Think about your future needs. So when considering housing for you and your family, you want to find the right fit. It should accommodate your needs now and into the future. This means thinking about whether you have the space for a family caregiver to live nearby or need accessible features to better navigate your home should your mobility change. So ADUs can work well as an option for you to age in your home and community.
All right, some good thoughts from Shannon and Danielle. We also have additional resources from AARP. We have the ABCs of ADUs, a guide to accessory dwelling units, which is a 20-page primer and best practices guide. This is a very practical guide, and I strongly recommend getting that as you're making your decision on whether or not to build an ADU for yourself. Additionally, we've got a new book out that's called Accessory Dwelling Units, a step-by-step guide to design and development from AARP, which includes space planning, ADU designs, financing, and budgeting information. Both are available free of charge on our website, and they're downloadable, or you can order a printed version. Just go to aarp.org/ADU. Also, for specifics regarding AHUs here in Des Moines, go to our website, which you see on the screen in front of you. And it's got some great information that Mike has already laid out on specifics related to ordinance and step-by-step process for if you do want to start building that AHU on your own. Kris and Mike, we're just about out of time, so thanks so much for taking part in this webinar. Before we go, any thoughts about AHUs as a housing option for Des Moines homeowners? Kris, let's throw it to you.
A couple of things I would say is it's a great way to go into any neighborhood. So this is really available to anyone, but it may not be you. It may be a friend of yours that you know that is looking for somewhere to be a parent. So think about it as options for friends. And certainly I'm a huge Des Moines fan, but anybody that you know in the central Iowa or even Iowa area, this will be important that we continue to spread these throughout the state. So talk to people and make sure that people are aware this is a housing option across the entire state.
Thanks, Kris. And Mike, what are your thoughts for people considering an AHU here in Des Moines?
Well, Brad, the city of Des Moines is committed to implementing the vision of Plan DSM, and one of the primary parts of that is creating a diverse housing stock with a variety of price points in all neighborhoods. And we really believe that the accessory housing units is a great starting point for that. I do want to take a moment just to say thanks to Iowa AARP and Home Inc. Both organizations have been great supporters of our Plan DSM vision and the adoption of our new codes, and then supporting implementation of provisions for these accessory housing units going forward. So thank you very much for all of your time.
Well, and thank you, Mike. And thanks again to the city of Des Moines, Kris, Home Inc., and all the partners that we've had throughout this process. And I do want to thank you for joining us. There is a wealth of information about AHUs out there. So if you're considering one, check out our website, as I alluded to earlier, or feel free to call the city, because the city is very helpful. And again, you're likely to talk to a live person. So thank you for your time and have a great rest of your day.